the Saqqara Bird. In 1898, during archaeological excavations in the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, Egypt, a small wooden object was uncovered from a tomb dating back to around 200 BCE. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable. A carved figure of a bird, roughly 14 centimeters in length, made from sycamore wood. It was catalogued as a ceremonial artifact and placed in storage, largely ignored for decades. What drew later attention was not its artistic style, but its form. Unlike traditional Egyptian bird representations, the Saqqara bird lacks legs and feathers carved for realism. Instead, it features a streamlined body, a vertical tail fin, and wings that resemble airfoils rather than decorative elements. The proportions are precise. The symmetry is intentional. It does not look like a bird frozen in motion, it looks engineered. For much of the 20th century, the object was dismissed as a toy or a symbolic figurine. However, in the 1960s and 70s, aeronautical engineers and independent researchers began to examine its shape more closely. When replicas were constructed and tested in wind tunnels, an unexpected pattern emerged. The model demonstrated stable, gliding characteristics when adjusted with a horizontal stabilizer, a feature absent from the original artifact but common in modern aircraft design. This discovery raised an uncomfortable question for conventional historical narratives. Ancient Egyptian engineering is well documented in architecture, mathematics, and astronomy. Their understanding of balance, measurement, and materials was advanced for its time. The Saqqara bird suggested that this knowledge might have extended into principles of aerodynamics, not in the sense of powered flight but in understanding lift, drag, and controlled descent. Some researchers proposed that the artifact could have been a scale model, possibly used for experimentation or demonstration. Others suggested it may have been attached to a now-lost stabilizing component made from organic material that did not survive burial conditions. What remains undeniable is that its design follows rules that would not be formally described until thousands of years later. The context of its discovery adds to the mystery. Saqqara was not only a burial site but also a center of learning, ritual, and experimentation. Objects placed in tombs often reflected knowledge, status, or symbolic mastery over natural forces. In this environment, the Saqqara bird may have represented more than art. It may have symbolized control over air and motion, concepts deeply tied to Egyptian cosmology. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. There is no direct evidence that ancient Egyptians achieved sustained flight. No written records describe flying machines. Yet the artifact resists easy categorization. It is too precise to be purely decorative, too functional in form to be accidental. Over time, the Saqqara bird has become a symbol of a broader idea, that ancient civilizations may have explored technological principles that were later forgotten, abandoned, or never fully realized. Not every experiment leads to a revolution. Some ideas appear briefly, leave a trace, and vanish with the culture that conceived them. Today, the original artifact is housed in the Cairo Museum, still officially labeled as a bird figurine. But its shape continues to invite analysis, replication, and debate. It stands quietly as a reminder that technological progress is not always linear, and that history may contain moments of insight that arrived long before the world was ready to use them. Greek fire. Greek fire emerged in the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine Empire during the 7th century, at a moment when the survival of the state depended on technological advantage. Surrounded by enemies and facing repeated naval sieges, Constantinople required a weapon capable of altering the balance of power at sea. What appeared instead was not an improvement of existing warfare, but something entirely unfamiliar. Contemporary accounts describe Greek fire as a liquid substance launched from siphons mounted on ships. Upon contact, it ignited instantly and continued to burn even when floating on water. Attempts to extinguish it with seawater only intensified the flames. This single characteristic alone placed it far beyond the known chemical understanding of the medieval world. The weapon proved decisive. During several major sieges of Constantinople, Byzantine fleets deployed Greek fire against enemy ships, causing widespread panic and destruction. Wooden hulls ignited within seconds. Crews abandoned vessels in terror. Entire naval formations collapsed without direct engagement. For centuries, Greek fire functioned not only as a weapon, but as a psychological force, reinforcing the empire's reputation as technologically untouchable. What makes Greek fire extraordinary is not merely its effect, but the system surrounding it. The formula was treated as a state secret of the highest order. Production was centralized, transmission of knowledge was strictly controlled, and even the operators who deployed it may not have known its exact composition. This level of information security resembles modern military protocols rather than medieval craftsmanship. Historians believe Greek fire may have been based on petroleum derivatives, quicklime, sulfur, or other flammable compounds, possibly refined through distillation techniques far ahead of their time. However, no surviving recipe exists. Written descriptions are deliberately vague, and no physical samples have ever been recovered. When the Byzantine Empire declined, the knowledge vanished with it. Unlike many ancient technologies that were gradually improved or rediscovered, Greek fire left no clear descendants. Later civilizations attempted to replicate its effects using incendiary weapons, but none achieved the same combination of ignition, persistence, and resistance to water. For hundreds of years, no equivalent technology appeared on the battlefield. The loss of Greek fire reveals an often overlooked truth about technological history. Innovation does not guarantee continuity. Without stable institutions, documentation, and transmission, even the most advanced knowledge can disappear entirely. Greek fire was not lost because it was ineffective, but because it was too tightly controlled, too dependent on a single political structure. In modern terms, Greek fire resembles an early form of chemical warfare, developed without a formal understanding of chemistry. Its creators worked through empirical experimentation, refining substances through trial, error, and secrecy. The result was a weapon that operated on principles science would only later explain. Today, Greek fire exists only in texts, illustrations, and speculation. Its true composition remains unknown, yet its impact is undeniable. For several centuries, it provided a technological edge unmatched anywhere else in the world. It stands as one of history's clearest examples of a technology that appeared fully formed, changed the course of events, and then vanished without leaving a reproducible legacy. Greek fire reminds us that progress is fragile. Knowledge can surge forward, achieve dominance, and still be erased. Sometimes, history preserves the effect but not the method, leaving behind only the quiet evidence that someone long ago knew how to do something the rest of the world would not understand again for generations. The London Hammer. The object known as the London Hammer entered public awareness in 1936, when a couple hiking near the town of London, Texas, discovered a curious stone partially embedded in limestone. Protruding from the rock was what appeared to be a wooden handle. Upon closer inspection, the stone was broken open, revealing a metal hammerhead encased entirely within the hardened mineral. At first, the find was treated as a local curiosity. Hammers were common tools, and the idea that one could become trapped in rock over time did not seem extraordinary. What transformed the London Hammer into a subject of serious debate was not its appearance, but the geological context surrounding it. The limestone in which the hammer was embedded was identified as part of a formation traditionally dated to the Cretaceous period, approximately 100 million years old. According to standard geological understanding, such rock forms over immense spans of time through sedimentation and compression. If the hammer had truly been encased naturally, its presence would challenge the established timeline of human technological development. The hammer itself consists of two primary components. The head is made of iron and measures roughly 6 inches in length. Metallurgical analysis revealed a composition of approximately 96% iron, with small amounts of chlorine and sulfur. Notably absent was carbon, an unusual feature, as most forged iron contains carbon impurities. This composition grants the metal a high resistance to corrosion, which may explain its remarkably preserved state. The wooden handle, partially petrified, showed signs of mineral replacement consistent with long-term fossilization. While not fully transformed into stone, its structure suggested prolonged exposure to mineral-rich environments rather than simple aging or burial. Skeptics proposed alternative explanations. Some suggested the hammer was a 19th-century mining tool that became encased in rapidly forming concretion. Others argued that mineralization can occur far faster than commonly assumed under specific conditions. These explanations, however, do not fully account for the uniform enclosure of the hammer within solid limestone, nor the absence of visible intrusion paths or fractures. What makes the London hammer particularly unsettling is its ordinariness. It is not a complex machine, not a ceremonial artifact, not an object of symbolic significance. It is a simple tool, a hammer, identical in purpose to those used by humans for thousands of years. This simplicity strips away mythological interpretation and forces the question into the realm of timelines rather than imagination. Throughout the mid-20th century, the hammer circulated among private collections and was periodically examined by researchers from different backgrounds. No consensus was reached. Mainstream archaeology largely dismissed it as an anomalous but explainable artifact, while alternative historians viewed it as evidence of forgotten chapters in human history. The London hammer occupies an uncomfortable space between disciplines. It is too geological to be ignored by geologists, too technological to be irrelevant to archaeologists, and too controversial to be embraced by either. As a result, it exists in a kind of academic silence, known, documented, yet rarely discussed in formal literature. If the hammer is truly ancient, it implies not merely advanced technology, but the presence of tool-using beings far earlier than currently accepted. If it is not, then it highlights the limitations of dating methods and the assumptions used to interpret geological formations. In either case, the implications are significant. Today, the London hammer remains preserved as it was found, metal and would still locked within stone. It does not demand belief, nor does it offer proof. It simply exists, a quiet contradiction resting against the edges of accepted history. As with many objects labeled as anomalies, its greatest impact is not what it proves, but what it destabilizes. The London hammer reminds us that history is reconstructed from fragments, and that occasionally, a single ordinary object can sit in the wrong place, at the wrong time, and refuse to be fully explained. The Dropa Stones. The story of the Dropa Stones begins in the remote and inhospitable regions of the Bayan Kerala Mountains, located along the border between China and Tibet. In the late 1930s, a Chinese archaeological expedition reportedly entered a system of high-altitude caves, far removed from established settlements. What they discovered there would later become one of the most controversial and disputed artifacts of the 20th century. Inside the caves were numerous small burial chambers carved directly into the rock. The skeletal remains found within were described as unusually small in stature, with disproportionately large skulls. Near many of these remains lay flat stone discs, each approximately 30 centimeters in diameter, with a precise central hole and faint spiral grooves etched into their surfaces. These objects would later be referred to as the Dropa Stones. At first, the discs attracted little attention. Stone objects are common in ancient sites, and their presence alone was not extraordinary. However, closer examination revealed details that resisted conventional interpretation. The spiral grooves were not decorative. Under magnification, they appeared to form continuous, carefully engraved paths, beginning at the center and extending outward in a pattern reminiscent of recorded information. Decades later, in the 1960s, claims emerged that some of these stones had been analyzed using advanced imaging techniques. According to these reports, the grooves contained microscopic markings that followed consistent sequences, suggesting an intentional encoding rather than random wear. Even more puzzling was the alleged discovery of trace amounts of cobalt and other metals within the stone composition, elements uncommon in such artifacts and difficult to explain using known ancient manufacturing methods. The Dropa stones became associated with translations attributed to a researcher said to have worked at a Chinese Academy of Sciences. These translations allegedly described a narrative of a group known as the Dropa, beings who arrived from the sky, suffered a crash, and were unable to return. Over time, they were said to have integrated with local populations. While these claims remain unverified, they played a significant role in shaping the legends surrounding the stones. What elevates the Dropa stones beyond folklore is the consistency of their physical description across independent accounts. Multiple sources describe the same dimensions, the same spiral structure, and the same central perforation. The discs were not crude. Their symmetry suggests deliberate tooling and controlled shaping, despite the hardness of the stone material. Mainstream academia has largely distanced itself from the story. Official records of the expedition are incomplete, and many of the physical artifacts are reportedly lost or inaccessible. This absence of material evidence has allowed skepticism to dominate formal discussion. Yet, the lack of documentation does not fully explain why the story persisted across decades and cultures. If the Dropa stones were merely symbolic objects, their design remains unusually precise. If they were functional, their function remains unknown. They do not fit easily into known categories of ritual items, tools, or art. Their structure suggests intent without providing context. The enduring fascination with the Dropa stones lies not in what they claim to represent, but in what they fail to explain. They occupy a narrow space between archaeology and speculation, where fragments of reported evidence resist both confirmation and dismissal. Today, the Dropa stones exist more as an idea than as physical objects. Whether lost, hidden, or never fully documented, they remain a reminder that some discoveries do not integrate smoothly into historical frameworks. They linger at the edges of knowledge, where stories survive even when proof fades, leaving behind the unsettling possibility that not all technologies or records were meant to endure. Ancient batteries of Parthia. The artifacts commonly referred to as the ancient batteries of Parthia were first brought to public attention in the early 1930s near the ruins of ancient Seleucia, close to modern-day Baghdad. During excavations conducted by German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, a series of small ceramic vessels were uncovered. At the time, they were catalogued as ordinary containers, likely used for storage or ritual purposes. It was only later that their unusual internal structure began to raise questions. Each vessel consisted of a clay jar roughly 15 centimeters tall. Inside was a rolled copper cylinder, fitted tightly against the inner walls, and within that cylinder sat an iron rod, suspended without touching the copper. The opening of the jar was sealed with what appeared to be bitumen or asphalt, an effective insulating material known and widely used in the region during antiquity. This configuration was not accidental. When Koenig examined the objects more closely, he noticed that their design closely resembled that of a galvanic cell, a basic battery capable of generating electrical current when filled with an acidic electrolyte. Experiments conducted decades later demonstrated that when these vessels were filled with substances such as vinegar, wine, or citrus juice, they could produce a measurable electric charge. The implications were immediate and unsettling. The Parthian Empire, which controlled the region between roughly 250 BCE and 224 CE, was known for its military strength, trade networks, and craftsmanship. However, there was no accepted evidence that Parthian society possessed knowledge of electricity or its applications. The jars appeared to embody a principle that would not be formally described until the modern era. Skeptics argued that the vessels were coincidental in design and never intended to generate electricity. They suggested alternative uses, such as storage for scrolls or ritual items. Yet these explanations struggled to account for the precise isolation of the iron rod from the copper cylinder, as well as the deliberate sealing of the container to prevent leakage or contamination. Further testing revealed that when multiple jars were connected in sequence, their voltage increased. While the electrical output was modest, it was sufficient to perform simple electrochemical processes. One leading hypothesis suggested that the batteries may have been used for electroplating, a technique that deposits a thin layer of metal onto another surface. Ancient artifacts from the region show traces of gilding so fine that traditional mechanical methods would have been extremely difficult to achieve. What makes the Parthian batteries particularly striking is their apparent lack of continuity. There are no surviving texts describing their construction, no depictions showing their use, and no clear descendants of the technology in later civilizations. Whatever knowledge produced them seems to have existed briefly and then disappeared. This raises a critical point about ancient innovation. Knowledge in antiquity was often localized, practical, and closely guarded. Without standardized education systems or widespread documentation, technological insights could vanish with a single generation. The batteries may have been tools used by a small group of craftsmen who understood their effects, even if they lacked a theoretical explanation. Importantly, the Parthians would not have needed to understand electricity as a concept. They only needed to observe consistent results. If a device produced a useful outcome, whether for coating metals, ritual symbolism, or specialized craftsmanship, it would have been valued regardless of scientific theory. Modern reconstructions of the Parthian batteries demonstrate that they function reliably under the right conditions. This alone distinguishes them from purely speculative artifacts. They are not hypothetical. They work. Today, the original jars are displayed in museums, often described cautiously, framed as curiosities rather than confirmed electrical devices. This careful language reflects the discomfort they create within linear models of technological progress. The ancient batteries of Parthia do not suggest a lost electrical civilization. They suggest something subtler, that fragments of advanced understanding can appear in isolated forms, serving specific purposes, and then vanish without reshaping the world. Progress does not always move forward. Sometimes it flickers briefly, illuminates a narrow space, and then goes dark. In that sense, these small clay jars represent not a revolution, but a moment, a quiet demonstration that the boundary between ancient craftsmanship and modern science is thinner than history often allows us to believe. The Shroud of Turin Imaging Anomaly. The Shroud of Turin is a linen cloth measuring approximately 4 meters in length, bearing the faint image of a human figure. For centuries, it was regarded primarily as a religious relic, preserved, venerated, and occasionally displayed. Its true transformation into a scientific anomaly occurred in the late 20th century, when modern imaging technology revealed characteristics that could not be explained by known medieval techniques. The image on the shroud is not painted. No pigments, brush strokes, or binding agents have been conclusively identified on the fibers. Instead, the discoloration is limited to the outermost layers of the linen threads, penetrating no more than a few micrometers deep. This superficiality is critical. It suggests a process that altered the surface without soaking into the fabric, something difficult to achieve even with modern methods. In 1898, the shroud was photographed for the first time. When the photographic negative was developed, a startling discovery was made. The negative appeared as a positive image. Light and dark values were reversed in a way that revealed anatomical details with remarkable clarity. This inversion implied that the original image encoded tonal information in a manner consistent with photographic principles, centuries before photography existed. Further analysis in the 1970s deepened the mystery. A multidisciplinary research team conducted extensive non-destructive testing, including ultraviolet fluorescence, infrared imaging, and three-dimensional analysis. The results demonstrated that the intensity of the image correlated with the distance between the cloth and the body it once covered. This property allowed the creation of three-dimensional reconstructions using image processing software, producing a relief-like representation of the figure. No known artistic technique from the Middle Ages can produce a naturally encoded depth map. The anatomical accuracy of the image added another layer of complexity. Proportions, muscle definition, and wound placement align closely with forensic observations of real human bodies rather than stylized religious art. The image lacks directional distortion, suggesting that it was not applied through contact alone, rubbing, or painting. Radiocarbon dating performed in 1988 placed the shroud within a medieval time frame. However, this result has been widely debated due to concerns about sample contamination, repair patches, and environmental exposure. While dating remains contested, it does not resolve the central issue: the method by which the image was formed. Multiple hypotheses have been proposed, ranging from chemical reactions to thermal effects and radiation-like processes. None have been able to reproduce all observed characteristics simultaneously. Some methods can create superficial discoloration, but fail to encode depth. Others achieve tonal variation, but leave residues not present on the shroud. What elevates the Shroud of Turin beyond religious debate is the nature of the anomaly itself. The image behaves like data rather than decoration. It stores spatial information, responds to digital analysis, and resists replication. It does not behave like a forgery attempting to deceive. It behaves like the result of a process not fully understood. In this sense, the shroud represents a technological gap. It presents an outcome without a known mechanism. Regardless of its origin, the image demonstrates properties that align more closely with modern imaging concepts than with medieval craftsmanship. Today, the Shroud of Turin remains preserved under controlled conditions, studied intermittently as techniques advance. Each new analysis refines the questions without resolving them. The cloth continues to exist at the intersection of history, material science, and imaging technology. The anomaly lies not in what the shroud represents, but in how it functions. It stands as a rare example of an object from the past that behaves according to principles only formally recognized centuries later. In the broader context of technological history, the Shroud of Turin is not an artifact of belief, but a reminder that outcomes can precede understanding, leaving behind evidence that waits patiently for explanation. Inca Polygonal Stone Masonry. Across the high Andes of South America, the remains of the Inca civilization stand with a quiet confidence that has resisted time, earthquakes, and centuries of exposure. Among their most striking achievements is their polygonal stone masonry, a construction technique so precise that it continues to challenge modern engineering assumptions. The Inca Empire reached its height in the 15th century, governing a vast territory without the use of iron tools, wheeled transport, or draft animals suitable for heavy hauling. Despite these limitations, they constructed walls composed of massive stone blocks, each uniquely shaped and fitted together with extraordinary accuracy. These stones were not uniform bricks. They were irregular, multi-angled forms, cut to interlock perfectly with neighboring blocks. The most remarkable feature of Inca polygonal masonry is the absence of mortar. The stones are held together entirely by their own weight and geometry. In many cases, the joints are so tight that even a thin blade cannot be inserted between them. This precision is consistent across sites such as Cusco, Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and Machu Picchu. From an engineering perspective, the design is highly functional. The irregular polygonal shapes distribute stress evenly across the structure. During seismic activity, the stones are able to shift minutely and then settle back into place, dissipating energy rather than absorbing it. This explains why Inca walls have survived earthquakes that destroyed later colonial buildings constructed with European techniques. The process by which the Inca achieved this precision remains a subject of careful study. The stones, often weighing several tons, were quarried from distant locations and transported across mountainous terrain. Tool marks suggest the use of stone hammers and abrasion rather than cutting blades. Each block was shaped individually, repeatedly lifted, placed, removed, and adjusted until a perfect fit was achieved. This method required not only physical labor, but an advanced understanding of geometry, load distribution, and material behavior. The builders were not following a template. Each stone was unique, yet it had to integrate flawlessly into an evolving structure. This implies a level of planning and spatial reasoning comparable to modern architectural modeling, achieved without written blueprints or formal mathematics as we define it today. What further distinguishes Inca masonry is its intentional complexity. In some walls, stones feature up to 12 angles, each serving a structural purpose. Corner joints are reinforced with specially shaped blocks that lock multiple directions together. These choices suggest an emphasis on long-term stability rather than speed or ease of construction. The cultural context of this technique is equally important. In Inca society, stone was not merely a building material. It was considered a living element of the landscape, tied to the mountains, which were seen as sacred entities. Precision stonework reflected harmony with natural forces rather than dominance over them. The walls were designed to endure, not to impress temporarily. Attempts to replicate Inca polygonal masonry using modern tools have demonstrated its difficulty. While machines can cut stone with precision, reproducing the exact interlocking geometry by hand remains time-consuming and costly. Modern builders typically abandon the method in favor of standardized blocks and reinforcement materials. Despite extensive research, no definitive explanation fully accounts for the efficiency with which the Inca executed this technique across vast regions. There is no evidence of a centralized training manual or uniform construction code. Knowledge appears to have been transmitted through practice, tradition, and apprenticeship, refined over generations. Inca polygonal stone masonry represents a form of engineering that prioritizes resilience over rigidity. It does not rely on adhesives, reinforcements, or redundancy. Instead, it uses geometry as its primary technology. This approach allowed the Inca to build structures that adapted to their environment rather than resisting it. Today, these walls continue to function exactly as intended. They do not crack. They do not collapse. They respond to movement with calm efficiency. Their survival is not accidental. It is the result of deliberate design choices that anticipated forces not formally studied until centuries later. In the broader history of construction, Inca polygonal masonry stands as a reminder that technological sophistication does not always require advanced tools or written theory. Sometimes, it emerges from observation, iteration, and a deep understanding of materials, producing results that remain unmatched long after the civilization itself has disappeared. The Coso Artifact. The object known as the Coso Artifact entered public discussion in 1961, when 3 amateur mineral collectors were searching for geodes in the mountainous region near Olancha, California. While cutting open a nodule believed to contain crystalline formations, they encountered something entirely unexpected. Embedded within the hardened material was a metallic object, partially visible and clearly manufactured. The surrounding material was not loose sediment. It was a dense, mineralized concretion that required mechanical cutting to open. At its center sat a cylindrical metal core surrounded by a white ceramic-like substance, with a distinct hexagonal pattern visible on one end. The structure was symmetrical, precise, and unmistakably artificial. Initial examination suggested a strong resemblance to a spark plug, a component associated with internal combustion engines developed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This identification immediately created tension between appearance and context. If the object was indeed a spark plug, its presence inside a solid concretion raised questions about the time required for such mineralization to occur. Geological concretions are typically associated with long-term mineral deposition processes. While some can form relatively quickly under specific conditions, the density and hardness of the Coso artifacts surrounding material suggested a prolonged period of formation. This discrepancy became the core of the mystery. X-ray imaging revealed additional details. The central metal rod appeared to be made of iron or steel, while the outer shell showed characteristics of ceramic insulation. There was no evidence that the object had been forced into the rock. The concretion had formed uniformly around it, conforming precisely to its shape. As the artifact gained attention, it was passed among researchers, collectors, and skeptics. One later analysis identified it as resembling a champion spark plug model manufactured in the 1920s. This explanation offered a plausible modern origin, yet it did not fully resolve the geological inconsistencies. If the object was recent, the rapid formation of such a concretion remained difficult to account for under normal environmental conditions. Supporters of the anomaly emphasized the artifact's complete enclosure and lack of external fractures. Unlike objects buried and later fossilized, the Coso artifact appeared sealed from all sides. Its condition suggested mineral growth rather than compression, indicating a process that followed, rather than preceded, the object's placement. Critics argued that mineralization can occur faster than commonly assumed, particularly in environments rich in silica, ash, or mineral-saturated water. However, even these explanations struggled to produce comparable examples involving complex manufactured objects with uniform encasement. The Coso artifact is notable for its simplicity. It is not an elaborate device, nor does it display advanced technology by modern standards. Its power lies in its familiarity. A spark plug is a mundane component, associated with routine machinery and everyday engineering. This ordinariness makes the context of its discovery more unsettling. There are no legends, no ancient texts, no symbolic interpretations tied to the artifact. It exists entirely within the physical evidence of its own structure. This absence of narrative makes it difficult to categorize. It does not align neatly with known archaeological frameworks, nor does it fit comfortably within purely modern explanations. Over time, the artifact disappeared from public examination, limiting further analysis. What remains are photographs, X-ray images, and first-hand accounts. The lack of access has only reinforced its ambiguous status. The Coso Artifact ultimately challenges assumptions rather than offering conclusions. It highlights the difficulty of interpreting objects when geological processes and human manufacturing intersect. Whether it represents an unusual case of rapid mineralization or something more disruptive to established timelines, it resists definitive classification. In the broader context of technological history, the Coso Artifact serves as a reminder that interpretation depends as much on context as on form. When those two elements conflict, even the most ordinary object can become an anomaly. It stands quietly at the boundary between geology and technology, where explanations remain incomplete and certainty remains out of reach. Ancient acoustic engineering. Beneath the surface of Malta lies a structure unlike any other in the ancient world. Known as the Hypogeum of Halsaflini, it is a subterranean complex carved entirely from solid limestone, dating back to approximately 3300 to 3000 BCE. Long before the formal study of acoustics, this underground site demonstrates a sophisticated and deliberate manipulation of sound. The Hypogeum was discovered accidentally in 1902 during construction work. What appeared at first to be a simple cavity revealed itself as a multi-level labyrinth of chambers, corridors, and niches, extending several meters below ground. The entire complex was excavated using stone tools, yet its interior geometry displays remarkable consistency and control. What distinguishes the Hypogeum from other prehistoric structures is not its age or size, but its acoustic behavior. Certain chambers, most notably the so-called Oracle Room, exhibit pronounced resonance at specific low frequencies. When a human voice is projected within this space, the sound does not merely echo. It expands, deepens, and reverberates through the structure in a controlled and sustained manner. Modern acoustic measurements have identified resonance peaks around 110 to 114 Hz, frequencies known to interact strongly with the human body. At these frequencies, sound waves can be felt physically, not just heard. They travel through bone and tissue, producing sensations of vibration and altered perception. The design elements responsible for this effect appear intentional. The walls are curved rather than flat. Openings are positioned to guide sound between chambers. Ceiling heights vary in ways that amplify low frequencies while suppressing higher ones. These features are consistent throughout the complex, suggesting deliberate planning rather than accidental resonance. The Hypogeum also contains carved recesses and alcoves that function as acoustic reflectors. When sound is introduced in one chamber, it can be detected clearly in others, even without direct line of sight. This creates an interconnected sonic environment where vibration moves freely through stone. The builders of the Hypogeum had no written language, no known mathematical notation, and no instruments for measuring sound waves. Yet their construction demonstrates an empirical understanding of acoustic principles. Through repeated experimentation, they appear to have identified how shape, volume, and material influence sound behavior. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Hypogeum served multiple purposes over centuries. Human remains suggest its use as a burial site, while architectural features imply ceremonial functions. In this context, sound would have played a central role, transforming spoken words into immersive experiences that filled the underground space. Unlike surface structures, the Hypogeum isolates sound from external noise. Underground stone absorbs and contains vibration, allowing precise control over resonance. This isolation would have made acoustic effects more pronounced and predictable. What makes the Hypogeum particularly significant is the absence of comparable acoustic engineering in later cultures for thousands of years. While ancient civilizations constructed theaters and temples with attention to sound projection, none display the same focused manipulation of low-frequency resonance within enclosed spaces. The Hypogeum's acoustic behavior was not rediscovered intentionally. It emerged through modern testing, centuries after the site was sealed and forgotten. This delay underscores how specialized and fragile such knowledge can be when it is not documented or transmitted. Today, access to the Hypogeum is strictly limited to preserve its delicate environment. Its acoustic properties remain intact, unchanged since the moment the last stone tool was laid aside. The structure continues to respond to sound exactly as it did 5,000 years ago. The Hypogeum of Malta stands as evidence that ancient societies could develop highly specialized technological solutions without formal science. It reflects a form of engineering rooted in observation, repetition, and sensory feedback. Long before acoustics became a field of study, sound was already being shaped, guided, and amplified with precision. In the broader narrative of human innovation, the Hypogeum represents a moment where architecture and sound merged into a controlled system. It reminds us that technological advancement does not always leave behind equations or manuals. Sometimes, it leaves behind spaces that still perform their function, quietly and flawlessly, long after their creators have vanished. The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is one of the most enigmatic documents ever studied. Its story begins not with its creation, but with its rediscovery in 1912, when a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich acquired a collection of manuscripts from a Jesuit college near Rome. Among them was a bound codex unlike anything he had seen before. The manuscript consists of approximately 240 pages made from vellum, dated through radiocarbon analysis to the early 15th century. The pages are filled with handwritten text in an unknown script, accompanied by detailed illustrations of plants, astronomical diagrams, biological forms, and complex circular charts. From the moment it entered public awareness, it defied classification. The script of the Voynich manuscript does not correspond to any known language. Its characters are consistent, structured, and fluid, suggesting a practiced writing system rather than random symbols. Word spacing is regular. Lines follow grammatical-like patterns. Statistical analysis shows that the text possesses entropy levels similar to natural languages, yet no direct translation has ever been achieved. This balance between order and obscurity is central to the manuscript's mystery. Cryptographers who have studied the text note that it is neither simple substitution nor a known cipher. Frequency distributions resemble real linguistic systems, but attempts to map the symbols onto known alphabets consistently fail. Even advanced computational analysis has been unable to extract stable semantic meaning. The illustrations add further complexity. Many of the plants depicted do not match any known species. Their roots, leaves, and flowers appear anatomically deliberate, yet unfamiliar. Some resemble combinations of multiple real plants, while others seem entirely invented. The drawings are consistent in style and detail, suggesting a coherent internal logic rather than artistic fantasy. The astronomical sections include star charts and zodiac-like diagrams, but with deviations from standard medieval representations. Constellations are arranged in unfamiliar ways. Symbols repeat across pages, implying a system rather than decoration. The biological section depicts human figures interacting with tubular structures and pools of liquid, arranged in patterns that resist symbolic interpretation. What makes the Voynich manuscript particularly unsettling is the absence of correction. There are no visible edits, no crossed-out lines, no signs of hesitation. The text flows smoothly from beginning to end, as though copied from a source already complete. This suggests that the author understood exactly what they were writing, even if no one else does. Over the past century, the manuscript has attracted linguists, historians, mathematicians, and intelligence agencies. During World War II, some of the world's most skilled codebreakers examined it, including individuals experienced in cracking complex military ciphers. None succeeded. Theories have ranged from an unknown natural language to an elaborate cipher to a constructed system designed to encode specialized knowledge. Others have proposed that it represents a form of proto-scientific notation, documenting botanical, astronomical, or medical information in a symbolic framework lost to history. Importantly, the manuscript does not behave like a hoax. Creating such a text would require extraordinary effort, consistency, and foresight. The statistical coherence of the script would be difficult to fabricate without an underlying system. Yet no clear motive for deception has ever been identified, especially given the manuscript's obscure circulation prior to the 20th century. The materials themselves reinforce its authenticity. The ink composition matches medieval practices. The vellum shows aging consistent with its estimated date. There is no evidence of modern tampering or later additions. Despite countless studies, the Voynich Manuscript has never yielded a definitive interpretation. Each proposed solution fails to account for all observed features simultaneously. Partial explanations emerge, then collapse under closer scrutiny. Today, the manuscript is housed in a climate-controlled archive, digitized and freely available to researchers worldwide. Its accessibility has only deepened the mystery. More eyes have examined it than ever before, yet consensus remains elusive. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a rare example of preserved information without context. It appears complete, intentional, and systematic, yet detached from any known intellectual tradition. In the history of written knowledge, it represents a closed system, one that functions internally but refuses to connect outward. In the broader narrative of technology and understanding, the Voynich Manuscript suggests that systems of knowledge can exist without leaving descendants. They can be recorded, preserved, and still remain unreadable centuries later. It is not the mystery of what it says that defines the manuscript, but the fact that it says something clearly, deliberately, and persistently, without allowing the modern world to understand it. Mohenjo-Daro Advanced Urban Planning. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the Indus Valley Civilization, flourishing around 2600 BCE in what is now modern-day Pakistan. When its ruins were first excavated in the 1920s, archaeologists expected to find a primitive settlement typical of the ancient world. Instead, they uncovered a city that appeared methodical, regulated, and engineered with a level of urban planning unmatched for its time. The city was built on a precise grid system. Streets intersected at right angles, dividing the urban space into well-defined blocks. Main roads were wide and straight, while smaller residential streets branched off in a consistent pattern. This layout suggests centralized planning rather than organic growth, implying the existence of governing standards applied across the entire city. One of the most striking features of Mohenjo-Daro is its drainage system. Nearly every house was connected to a network of covered drains constructed from baked bricks. These drains ran beneath the streets, sloped carefully to ensure continuous flow, and were fitted with inspection openings for maintenance. Wastewater from kitchens, bathing areas, and latrines was efficiently removed from living spaces, a concept that would not become standard in many parts of the world until the modern era. Private sanitation was not limited to elite structures. Even modest homes often contained bathing platforms and drainage connections. This suggests that cleanliness and public health were not privileges, but integrated elements of daily life. The uniformity of these features across neighborhoods indicates a shared cultural priority rather than isolated innovation. The construction materials further reflect advanced planning. Bricks were standardized in size and proportion throughout the city, a detail that points to regulated production and quality control. This standardization allowed for efficient construction, structural stability, and easy replacement, principles central to modern urban development. Water management in Mohenjo-Daro was equally sophisticated. The city contained numerous wells, many of them cylindrical and carefully lined with brick. These wells were distributed throughout residential areas, ensuring access to clean water without reliance on centralized distribution alone. The most famous structure, the Great Bath, was a large, waterproofed pool built with layered brickwork and bitumen ceiling. Its design demonstrates a precise understanding of water containment and structural stress. The Great Bath was not an isolated feature. Its integration into the city's layout suggests it served a communal function, possibly linked to ritual purification or civic gatherings. Regardless of its purpose, its construction required coordinated labor, material sourcing, and technical oversight. Mohenjo-Daro also shows evidence of zoning. Residential areas were distinct from public and administrative spaces. Elevated platforms and fortified sections imply flood management strategies, as the city was built near the Indus River, which was prone to seasonal flooding. Layers of reconstruction indicate that the city was repeatedly rebuilt following floods, each time maintaining its original layout rather than adapting haphazardly. What makes this urban planning particularly remarkable is the absence of obvious markers of centralized authority. No palaces, monumental temples, or royal tombs dominate the site. Instead, the city appears organized around function rather than display. Power, if centralized, expressed itself through infrastructure rather than architecture. This raises important questions about governance. The consistency of design across such a large urban area implies regulation, enforcement, and long-term planning. Yet the lack of inscriptions or written laws leaves the administrative system largely invisible. What remains visible is the result: a city designed to operate smoothly, hygienically, and resiliently. The decline of Mohenjo-Daro remains uncertain. Environmental changes, shifting river courses, and resource pressures likely played a role. What is clear is that when the Indus Valley civilization faded, its urban knowledge did not transfer directly to successor cultures. For centuries, comparable sanitation and citywide infrastructure would not reappear at this scale. Mohenjo-Daro challenges the assumption that early cities were chaotic or unsanitary by default. It demonstrates that complex urban systems can emerge early, operate effectively, and then disappear without leaving a continuous legacy. In the history of technology, Mohenjo-Daro represents a peak achieved quietly. Its planners solved problems of water supply, waste removal, traffic flow, and structural durability with methods that remain recognizable today. Their solutions were not theoretical. They were built, used, and maintained by tens of thousands of people. The ruins now stand silent, but the city's design continues to speak. It reveals that long before modern engineering manuals and urban theory, humans were already capable of designing cities that prioritized health, order, and sustainability. Mohenjo-Daro was not simply ahead of its time. It reached a level of urban sophistication that the world would struggle to match again for thousands of years. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. The Iron Pillar of Delhi stands quietly within the Kutb complex in India, rising over 7 meters in height and weighing more than 6 tons. At first glance, it appears unremarkable. A simple column of metal, unadorned and austere. Its true significance becomes apparent only when one considers its age, composition, and condition. The pillar is generally dated to around the 4th century CE, during the reign of the Gupta Empire, a period often described as a golden age of Indian science and craftsmanship. An inscription on the pillar, written in Sanskrit, attributes its erection to a ruler identified as Chandra, widely believed to be Chandragupta II. This inscription alone would make the pillar historically valuable. What elevates it into the realm of technological anomaly is the material itself. The pillar is made of wrought iron, forged long before modern metallurgical techniques existed. Despite standing exposed to the elements for more than 16 centuries, enduring monsoon rains, intense heat, humidity, and air pollution, it shows virtually no corrosion. Its surface bears only a thin protective layer, while the bulk of the metal remains intact. In most environments, untreated iron rusts rapidly. Oxidation weakens the structure, flakes away material, and eventually causes failure. The Iron Pillar of Delhi defies this expectation completely. Its preservation is not the result of modern coatings or later interventions. It is original, continuous, and uniform. Metallurgical analysis has revealed that the pillar contains an unusually high concentration of phosphorus, while lacking sulfur and manganese, elements commonly found in modern iron. This composition is not accidental. It reflects a forging process that relied on charcoal-fired furnaces and careful control of or selection. During forging, the high phosphorus content facilitated the formation of a passive protective layer on the surface of the iron. This layer, composed primarily of iron hydrogen phosphate, acts as a barrier against moisture and oxygen. Unlike rust, which spreads and destroys material, this compound stabilizes the surface. It forms slowly over time and remains adherent, preventing deeper corrosion. The process is subtle, self-sustaining, and remarkably effective. What makes this achievement extraordinary is that it was accomplished without theoretical knowledge of chemistry or corrosion science. The craftsmen who forged the pillar did not work from equations or written manuals. Their expertise was empirical, developed through observation, repetition, and inherited technique. The result was a metallurgical solution that modern science would only later explain. The pillar was not cast as a single piece. It was forged through repeated heating and hammering, likely assembled from smaller blooms of iron welded together. Achieving structural integrity at this scale required precise temperature control and coordinated labor. Any significant flaw would have compromised the entire structure. Beyond its physical properties, the pillar also reflects cultural priorities. It was erected not as a utilitarian object, but as a monument, likely associated with religious or ceremonial significance. This means durability was not merely desirable. It was essential. The pillar was intended to endure, to stand as a permanent marker of power, devotion, or legitimacy. Over the centuries, the iron pillar has been relocated, handled, and exposed to varying conditions. Despite this, its resistance to corrosion has remained consistent. Modern attempts to replicate its exact composition and forging process have met with mixed success. While similar alloys can be produced, reproducing the same long-term stability without modern additives remains challenging. The pillar's survival highlights an important distinction in technological history. Advancement does not always follow a straight line toward complexity. Sometimes, highly effective solutions emerge from specific contexts and disappear when those traditions fade. The metallurgical knowledge that produced the iron pillar was not widely transmitted beyond its region or era. As empires rose and fell, the techniques that made such ironwork possible were gradually replaced by different priorities, materials, and methods. The result was not improvement in every direction, but divergence. Some solutions were lost not because they were inferior, but because they were no longer needed or understood. Today, the iron pillar of Delhi remains an open-air experiment in ancient engineering. It continues to perform exactly as it did when it was first erected. Its endurance is not accidental. It is the outcome of deliberate material choice, skilled workmanship, and a deep practical understanding of metal behavior. In the broader story of technologies ahead of their time, the iron pillar stands as evidence that ancient societies could solve complex material problems with lasting success. It reminds us that technological mastery is not defined solely by modern frameworks. Sometimes it is defined by results, and few results speak more clearly than iron that refuses to rust. Ancient optical lenses of Crete. On the island of Crete, remnants of ancient civilizations lie layered beneath centuries of occupation. Among pottery shards, stone tools, and architectural remains, archaeologists have uncovered a category of objects that quietly challenges assumptions about early optical knowledge. These objects are small, carefully shaped pieces of crystal and polished stone that exhibit unmistakable lens-like properties. The most notable discoveries come from Minoan contexts dating between 2000 and 1400 BCE. These artifacts are typically made from rock crystal or translucent quartz, materials chosen not for decoration alone, but for their optical clarity. Many are plano-convex or biconvex in shape, ground and polished with deliberate curvature. Their surfaces are smooth, symmetrical, and consistent, indicating controlled craftsmanship rather than incidental wear. At first, these objects were interpreted as beads, ornaments, or ritual items. However, closer examination revealed that several of them magnify images when held at specific distances. The magnification is not extreme, but it is functional. Fine details become clearer, edges sharpen, symbols and textures that would otherwise blur into the background become distinguishable. This effect is not accidental. Optical testing has shown that some of these lenses possess focal lengths consistent with intentional shaping. The curvature is not random. It follows geometric patterns that produce predictable light refraction. Achieving this requires more than simple polishing. It requires iterative shaping, testing, and correction, a process that implies awareness of how light behaves when passing through curved transparent materials. The presence of such lenses raises immediate questions about their purpose. Crete during the Minoan period was a center of maritime trade, craftsmanship, and administration. The civilization produced intricate jewelry, detailed frescoes, and finely engraved seals. Many of these activities benefit directly from magnification. Precision engraving, gemstone carving, and seal-making all require close visual control. In administrative contexts, seals were used to mark ownership, authorize transactions, and secure storage. The inscriptions on these seals are often extremely small, carved with remarkable accuracy. The use of optical aids would have greatly enhanced the ability to produce and verify such details. The lenses also appear in proximity to workshops rather than purely ceremonial spaces. This spatial association supports a practical function. They were not buried as symbolic offerings. They were kept where skilled labor was performed. What makes the Cretan lenses particularly significant is their age. The earliest known widespread use of optical lenses in Europe is traditionally dated to the Roman period, with glass lenses appearing much later. The Cretan artifacts predate these developments by over a millennium. The materials used further complicate the narrative. Rock crystal is harder than glass and more difficult to shape. Grinding it into precise curvature using Bronze Age tools would have required patience, specialized abrasives, and refined technique. The investment of labor suggests that the result justified the effort. Despite this, there is no surviving written record describing optical devices or visual aids in Minoan culture. This absence does not negate their existence. It reflects a broader pattern in ancient technology, where practical knowledge was transmitted through apprenticeship rather than documentation. The lenses do not indicate a theoretical understanding of optics as a science. There is no evidence of equations, models, or abstract explanation. What they demonstrate is empirical mastery. The artisans of Crete understood that certain shapes improved vision. They knew how to reproduce those shapes reliably. That knowledge was sufficient. Over time, as the Minoan civilization declined and was absorbed by later cultures, this specialized craft appears to have faded. Subsequent societies on Crete did not continue the same optical traditions at a comparable level. The lenses became isolated artifacts rather than the foundation of a technological lineage. This pattern mirrors many early innovations. Without institutional continuity, techniques can disappear even when they are effective. The lenses did not fail. The context that sustained their production did. Modern analysis confirms that these objects function exactly as expected. They bend light, they magnify, they improve visual resolution. There is nothing symbolic about their behavior. They perform a task. The ancient optical lenses of Crete demonstrate that complex technological principles do not always announce themselves loudly in history. Sometimes they appear in small, easily overlooked forms. Tools held in the palm of a hand, quietly enhancing human capability. In the broader story of technologies ahead of their time, these lenses represent an early intersection between craftsmanship and perception. Long before optical science emerged as a discipline, human hands were already shaping light itself, guided by observation and refined through practice. The lenses remain as subtle evidence that the ability to see more clearly was valued, and achieved far earlier than commonly assumed. The Longyou Caves. In the Zhejiang province of eastern China lies a group of subterranean structures that remained hidden from historical record for centuries. Known today as the Longyou Caves, they were discovered only in 1992, when a local resident decided to drain a series of ponds long believed to be bottomless. As the water receded, vast artificial caverns were revealed beneath the surface. What emerged was not a natural formation, but a network of enormous underground chambers carved entirely from solid sandstone. To date, 24 caves have been identified, each separate from the others, yet remarkably similar in design. The scale of the excavation is difficult to overstate. Each cave covers an area of approximately 1,000 square meters, with ceilings rising up to 30 meters high. The walls of the caves are marked with uniform chisel patterns, arranged in precise, parallel lines that extend across every surface. These markings are consistent in depth, angle, and spacing, suggesting a standardized excavation technique applied systematically throughout the complex. No area appears unfinished or irregular. One of the most striking features of the Longyou Caves is their structural integrity. Despite being carved more than 2,000 years ago, likely during the late Qin or early Han period, the caves show no signs of collapse. The ceilings remain stable. The walls are intact. There are no supporting pillars, reinforcements, or visible stress fractures. This stability indicates a sophisticated understanding of rock mechanics. The builders knew where to excavate and where to leave material in place. They maintained consistent wall thickness and ceiling curvature, distributing load in a way that preserved the structure over centuries. The caves are not random in layout. Many contain stone bridges, raised platforms, drainage channels, and carved pools. Some feature slanted floors designed to direct water away from critical areas. These elements suggest intentional planning beyond simple excavation. The question of purpose remains unresolved. The caves do not match known mining sites. There is no evidence of extracted material being used elsewhere in nearby architecture. No tools, inscriptions, or artifacts have been found inside to indicate long-term habitation or ritual use. The absence of soot or fire damage suggests they were not used for prolonged occupation. Equally puzzling is the absence of historical documentation. Chinese historical records from the relevant periods are detailed and extensive, yet none mention the construction of such massive underground works. The labor required would have been immense, involving thousands of workers over many years. Such an undertaking would normally leave administrative or logistical traces. Estimates suggest that millions of cubic meters of stone were removed. Where this material went remains unknown. It does not appear in local buildings, fortifications, or roads. The disposal or reuse of this stone was either undocumented or deliberately concealed. The uniformity across multiple caves implies centralized planning and skilled coordination. Each cave appears to follow the same design principles, yet none intersect or weaken neighboring structures. This indicates precise surveying and spatial awareness in 3 dimensions, achieved without modern instruments. The caves also exhibit acoustic and thermal stability. Temperatures inside remain relatively constant year-round, and sound behaves predictably within the space. While these properties may be secondary effects, they reflect careful control of volume and geometry. Modern engineers studying the Longyou Caves have noted the efficiency of the excavation. The chisel marks suggest a rhythmic, methodical approach, possibly using templates or guides. This level of consistency is rare even in modern underground construction without mechanized equipment. Despite extensive study, no definitive explanation has emerged. The caves were clearly not accidental, nor were they the result of gradual expansion. They were conceived, executed, and completed as a unified project. The Longyou Caves challenge conventional assumptions about ancient construction capabilities. They demonstrate that large-scale underground engineering could be achieved with precision, durability, and foresight long before modern technology. Today, the caves stand open, silent, and unchanged. They do not reveal their purpose through decoration or inscription. Instead, they speak through absence of records of tools of explanation. In the broader history of technology, the Longyou Caves represent an achievement without a narrative. They show that complex engineering can exist independently of documented theory or preserved intention. Their creators solved problems of excavation, stability, and design at a scale that remains impressive even now. The caves remain exactly as they were left, waiting beneath the surface, offering only their structure as evidence. They are not ruins in decay. They are finished works, complete and enduring, quietly demonstrating that ancient engineering could reach levels of ambition and execution that history would struggle to account for centuries later. Ancient astronomical computers of Mesoamerica. Long before the emergence of modern mathematics or mechanical computation, the civilizations of Mesoamerica developed systems capable of tracking time, celestial motion, and cosmic cycles with remarkable precision. Among the Maya, and later the Aztec and related cultures, astronomy was not a symbolic practice but a structured, data-driven discipline embedded into architecture, ritual, and governance. These societies did not build gears or metal mechanisms in the modern sense. Instead, they constructed what can be understood as astronomical computers, systems that processed observational data through stone, calendars, and spatial alignment, producing reliable predictions of celestial events over centuries. At the center of this system was timekeeping. The Maya calendar was not a single cycle, but a network of interlocking systems. The Tzolk'in tracked ritual days. The Hab followed the solar year. The long count recorded linear time across thousands of years. Together, these calendars functioned as a computational framework capable of synchronizing solar years, lunar cycles, and planetary movements. The accuracy of these calculations is evident in surviving inscriptions. Maya astronomers calculated the length of the solar year to within minutes of modern measurements. Their lunar tables predicted eclipses with precision comparable to early European astronomy. Venus, in particular, was tracked obsessively. Its synodic cycle was recorded, corrected, and embedded into ritual timing and military decisions. This astronomical data was not stored abstractly. It was encoded into physical structures. Temples, pyramids, and observatories were aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary risings. At sites like Chichen Itza, shadows cast during specific days of the year formed precise visual markers, effectively turning architecture into a timekeeping device. One of the most striking examples is the Caracol Observatory. Its windows and corridors are oriented toward specific celestial events, including Venus appearances and solar extremes. These alignments are not decorative. They functioned as fixed reference points, allowing repeated measurements across generations. The Dresden Codex preserves detailed astronomical tables, including eclipse cycles spanning centuries. These tables required long-term data accumulation, mathematical abstraction, and error correction. The system could project celestial positions far into the future without continuous observation, a hallmark of computational thinking. Unlike later mechanical computers, these systems relied on recurrence and pattern recognition rather than moving parts. The computation occurred through cyclical progression, where completing one cycle advanced another. Errors were corrected through intercalation, keeping the system synchronized with observed reality. This approach allowed Mesoamerican astronomers to simulate time itself. By advancing calendar cycles forward, they could determine future alignments, ritual dates, and celestial events. The result was a predictive model of the sky encoded entirely in numbers, stone, and tradition. The absence of metal instruments did not limit precision. Observations were made using sightlines, horizon markers, and repeatable reference points. Over centuries, accumulated data refined the system. The result was not theoretical astronomy, but applied celestial engineering. These astronomical computers shaped society. Agricultural cycles depended on them. Political legitimacy was tied to celestial timing. Major events were scheduled according to calculated alignments rather than immediate observation. What makes these systems particularly advanced is their resilience. Even after periods of collapse or disruption, the core astronomical knowledge persisted. The long count calendar spans dates far beyond the lifespan of any single civilization, reflecting a concept of time measured not in lifetimes, but in cosmic eras. When European observers encountered these calendars, they struggled to understand their purpose. Without gears or mechanisms, the computational nature was overlooked. Yet the results spoke for themselves. Predictions matched reality. Cycles aligned. Time remained coherent. Modern analysis confirms that these systems functioned as analog computers, using recurrence, synchronization, and spatial encoding to process astronomical data. They did not require electricity, metal, or written equations in the modern sense. They required patience, observation, and an understanding of long-term patterns. The astronomical computers of Mesoamerica demonstrate that advanced computation does not depend on technology as we define it today. It depends on structure, consistency, and the ability to model reality through repeatable systems. These civilizations transformed the sky into data and time into a machine. Their computers did not sit on tables or fit in rooms. They spanned cities, calendars, and centuries, quietly calculating the movement of the cosmos long before the word computation existed. Ending. Across history, progress has never moved in a straight line. Some ideas appear too early, built in worlds not yet ready to understand them. The technologies we explored were not mistakes or myths, but quiet proofs that knowledge can emerge, disappear, and reappear across time. These creations remind us that human curiosity has always reached beyond its era, shaping solutions that would only be fully appreciated centuries later. They stand as traces of ingenuity that history nearly forgot. If you enjoyed this journey through lost and forgotten advancements, consider leaving a like. It helps the channel reach those who appreciate thoughtful, calm storytelling. Subscribe if you'd like to continue exploring history, science, and the unexplained in a slower, more reflective way. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Different perspectives often reveal new layers to these stories. And if this video brought you a moment of calm or curiosity, share it with someone who might enjoy the same experience. Thank you for spending this time here. Wishing you good luck, peaceful thoughts, and sweet dreams.